Good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And the title of this evening's show is Alliance for Democracy Issues. The Alliance for Democracy is a wonderful organization of which I'm a member, and we'll have more about that later on. And David Delk is our vice chair of the national organization.
No, actually, I'm the chair, the co-chair of the national organization.
What a great start, yeah.
That's all right.
And Rick North has been on the show so many times, I think he's going to replace me pretty soon here. Rick,
nobody can replace you.
Yeah. Good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful.
Everybody's great and wonderful, except I'm all nervous. What the heck's going on here? Rick, it's your fault. We're going to have a good time this evening because we're going to talk about the Alliance for Democracy and a little about other organizations that do similar work to save our democracy and have our country and our government represent ordinary citizens. There's a lot of experience and hard work in recent years with these two characters in particular. So we'll talk about a little about the stuff that the Alliance for Democracy, the AFD, has been involved with over the years, and the successes, and you have no losses. And what's going on nowadays. Of course, you work on local stuff and regional stuff and stuff that has an import beyond just local and state like that.
Right, yeah. So we're a national organization with local chapters, and so I'm the co-chair of the National Alliance for Democracy with Nancy Price, and then I am the president of the Portland chapter along with Joan Horton. So we're kind of co-presidents just in terms of our structure. And then you're a member.
Yeah, I'm a member, yeah.
Right, yeah. Right. And so locally, we have focused on issues around campaign election reform and campaign contribution limitations and that sort of thing. Currently talking about ending corporate personhood, amending the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and then my T-shirt, the TPP, is one of the national issues that we've been working on locally. So that's the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a new free trade agreement, so-called, I should say, so-called free and so-called trade agreement, because actually it's not free and it's really not about trade. But well, we can go into that. So
what is it? Never heard of
yeah. So those are kind of local things we do that have national implications. But then we also get ourselves involved with, like with Rick, with his anti-fluoride campaign here in Portland. So that's one of the things that we've done. We're also involved with the effort here in Portland to save our reservoirs from being covered.
Save our reservoirs from being covered.
Yeah. So
let's talk about who you are personally before we get into these issues.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Yes, we do. There's some people who haven't seen you before.
Really? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, who am I?
And is that how it's going to be all evening? David E. Doak. How come you have a little E in the middle of your name, David E. Doak?
Nothing. I didn't think that there was anything particularly noticeable about me, so I thought it would be noticeable if I made the middle initial small, and then people would take note, and it's worked.
Do you have anything equally as interesting as that?
No,
let's shut the show down right now. It's all over.
Dry toast, so with no messed up initials or anything.
It's not messed up.
Are you a local talent? Are you from some other part of the country?
No, I was born here in Portland.
Wow.
62 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
In an apartment building with my twin brother, and close to downtown Portland. So I feel like I own downtown Portland because I've always been downtown. And while I don't live downtown anymore, I spend a lot of my time downtown, particularly around the First Unitarian Church.
Are you religious?
No.
You belong to a church?
I do.
Can you explain that?
I can't.
Rick, you ready to talk some?
Okay.
I go to the same church as he does.
I do sometimes too.
Yeah, so
Yeah. No, the church I go to, the First Unitarian Church, the Unitarians don't have a religious creed that they require you to believe in order to be a member of the church. So, in the Unitarians, there are, Catholics and Protestants and Buddhists and atheists and agnostics and a whole bunch of other things, I'm sure, as well, that I don't even know about. And some people who are, feel a spiritual calling, and others of us who don't particularly, but do share some values. And the church has 7 principles that they operate under, which I can't remember them offhand, but there's 7. And the principles have to do with how we relate to each other and how we relate to the world. So you're welcome to believe whatever creed or lack thereof that you want.
What do you
It's
believe?
a very welcoming church.
What do you believe?
I believe that someday, in terms of what happens after I die, I believe that I will find out after I die, and until then, it's total speculation. No one obviously knows, and so why am I going to spend a lot of time worrying about that?
Rick knows.
Rick knows.
the jokes that Garrison Keillor says about the Unitarians, they're all true. I just heard one a few weeks ago.
Lay it on
He
us.
said, because we are known for questioning everything, arguing everything, walking around, being activists, walking around with our clipboards, and the one I heard was Unitarians have a really hard time with hymns because they're always reading ahead to see if they agree with the words. That is a classic. There's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
Are you a native Oregonian?
No, born in New Jersey, grew up in upstate New York, a little town called Sydney.
Is that why you talk funny?
I do not talk funny. That's you. And went to Ohio to go to college and lived in Ohio a number of years, then to Baltimore. And then I moved here 19 years ago with my family. So it's been a great time.
With your family 19 years ago, where's your family now?
Well, my wife's still here. My son is still here. He lives in Northeast, and he works for the Portland Trail Blazers. He does group sales there. So we are Blazers fans all the way, obviously. And my daughter is back in Baltimore, and she had been working for the Chesapeake Bay Foundation in environmental ed. And she just last week got a job teaching high school. At a high school in Baltimore teaching environmental ed. It was she was in this program to train teachers to work in the inner city schools, and this job opened up, and it's right there in the city, and she was perfectly qualified for it, so it just worked out great.
You're from a family of tree huggers, aren't you?
We are, yes, we are. I don't know where she gets this stuff from.
Yeah, and you went to school in Ohio?
Yep, little college called Mount Union, which is known now for being the Division III national football champion as of last fall. They have had a tremendous football team. They weren't all that great when I was there, but they have developed, and they're known for that. Very good school, Northeast Ohio. Yeah. Small liberal arts.
And with your education, that gave you the wherewithal to feed yourself and put a roof over your head?
Yes.
What kind of work have you done all your life?
Actually, I was a high school social studies teacher right out of college. And I did that for 5 years, and then I joined the American Cancer Society. And that was my longest tenure, and that's what took me from different locations in Ohio to Baltimore and out here. I became the state director of the American Cancer Society. So I was with them for 21 years. And after that, I worked for the Northwest Environmental Institute. Dick and Jean Roy, you may know them, and they founded that for a couple of years. And then the Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, and I was the founder and director of a program called the Campaign for Safe Food. And we took on GMOs. nice non-controversial subject. Well, still battle, and the bovine growth hormone, RBGH or RBST. I led a nationwide program opposing that, and so I'm proud to say that just almost every dairy in Oregon and Washington are RBGH free. So, so I retired 2 years ago and have been causing trouble as an activist ever since. Try to help out Dave whenever I can, and in terms of what he's been doing, and then the fluoride issue also. I've been very active in that.
So you're managing to keep a roof over your head with the royalties you get from your investments overseas and the IMF and like that?
No, nothing like that. But we're cheap. My wife and I are cheap, so we're not exactly into the consumer. We're comfortable. Let's put it that way. Not rich, but comfortable, and we're fine.
Yeah. Is your wife going to see this show?
Yes, she is. Yes.
You want to tell
Which really worries me a lot, but so I have to try to be very careful and not say anything too dumb.
Look right at that camera there and tell her what you think of her. Be honest.
She is wonderful. Really, really. I mean that, Alec. I'm not just saying that. You really are.
And back to you again.
Yes.
Do you have a mate, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or somebody you want to talk about?
I have a partner.
A partner?
Yeah. And his name's Tom.
Hey, Tom?
Yeah, we've been together for 20 years.
20 years? He's
20
put up
years.
with you 20 years?
He has, yeah.
Tom's a neat guy. I love it.
Yeah, he really is. I'm very fond of him. Right, yes.
I never know.
Yeah, and when we got together, I had a heart problem, and I was also HIV positive, and I told him then that I probably wouldn't be around very long, and I don't know if that was, if I thought that would scare him away, or if that would, thinking he wouldn't have put up with me for very long would attract him. But anyway, he said, things have changed, and the heart problem got solved, and the HIV is now manageable and not a death warrant, and if you have proper medications. So here I am, 20 years later, still causing problems. Right. And he's still putting up with me.
How did you get to be the kind of a person that causes problems? The kind of problems I know you're causing, it's just great as far as I'm concerned, because I'm a screaming leftist rebel from way back.
Yeah. Well, how far should we go back?
We don't have
I was
that much
born on a, no. Actually, I was born on a rainy August day.
Do you remember?
In 1950. No, I was told it was raining. Actually, I don't remember the particular occasion, but it was just my mother had divorced my father in 1950. Very unusual, and I don't know. She never talked about it, so I don't really know why. But I would assume that he must have been abusive. But she never said anything about it. And I have a twin brother, and so we were poor, and we grew up on welfare. And so I got to see the effects of inequities and inequalities by living them at the bottom end. Mm-hmm. And I decided, it was a conscious decision. I decided at a relatively young age that as I grew older, and if I ever grew into the middle class, which I have, that I was not going to forget that experience. And that was going to inform at least part of who I was, who I am. And I've kept that. And that's kind of the origins. Then the other part of it is that I had a really great high school social studies American Problems teacher, Keith Anderson, and he was kind of a lefty person. And he introduced me to the Nation magazine, and the Progressive, and the New Republic, and Monthly Review, and what became Mother Jones. It was called Ramparts at the time. And there were a whole bunch of radical education projects. One was in San Francisco, and I used to get their pamphlets all the time. And so I kind of devoured all of that stuff. And so it kind of started informing my world outlook on how I understood how the world looked, and then based on my own experience, and for a long time, I really dealt with a lot of issues that didn't have anything to do with that, and finding myself, and, you know, all those kinds of things you do when you're young. And but after Tom and I got together, it was like, well, and I had my heart problem. I had 2 heart surgeries, and after the second surgery, it was like, well, I have got to act now and do something. And for a long time, I was hesitant about doing that because it was like, well, I don't know enough, and I had to have perfect knowledge, and I didn't have it, and so it kind of hindered me. And one day I said, no, I'm not going to wait for perfect knowledge. I'm going to act, even though I may not know it all. I can't wait. You have to do something, and instead of looking for perfect knowledge, you have to act on your values, and I know what my values are.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started joining groups, and one of them, just by happenstance, happened to be Alliance for Democracy, which was just forming at about the same time. So this was about 15, 16 years ago. And actually my partner knew this woman that he worked with, and she was involved with the Alliance for Democracy in the very early stages of it forming here in Portland. And Tom heard about it and said, I think you'd be interested in this. And he was right.
Yes, sir.
Right, yeah. And so I owe it all to Tom.
And they recognize your abilities and your talent, your interest, and whatever else it is about you. That makes you such a good leader for our organization until you've been up there for some years now, involved in. We get the publication regularly, of course, and I read it, and I look for your contributions. And incidentally, for you people out there who are watching, you need to learn what the Alliance for Democracy is about and what their publications are about. They're really very bright, articulate, and humane, and justice. That's really important for me. It's good for you what you're doing with your life based on your learning and what you think is important, huh?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like Rick, I retired recently, and this just totally fills my life, and it's not filling it with empty consumer kinds of stuff. It's really meaningful, and I think it's important, and I think other people think it's important. So.
You two are really strange and weird. How many lists are you on? Homeland Security and what else?
Yeah. We don't want to think about it.
No, we don't. No. Yeah. You know, in our meetings from time to time, we've had this discussion from people who might be a little paranoid and thinking that we have somebody who's new and wondering if they're an agent, an FBI agent or something. I was like, who cares? If they are, we're totally above board. We're totally legal in what we do, totally nonviolent. Totally. And if there's someone who thinks that that's worthy of being spied, worthy of their time to spy on us, well, so be it. It's like.
So I have a list of stock questions that there's no need in asking because I know what your answers are going to be. One of my favorite questions is, where do you see yourself on the political continuum, left, right, center, or off the one end or the other, or what?
Well, I'm left. What can I say? Well, honestly, just to go back to the church, because I know one of the principles of the South. I don't have memorized either, but typical Unitarian, but just a belief in justice, equality, and compassion. Those 3 qualities, and another principle is the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. And it's those values that I try to live up to. And I just think that hits it on the head right there, and I think that hopefully translates into whatever I do politically with the fluoridated water. I did not think that was good for every individual. I think it's there's a lot of evidence it's harmful to your health. It can be, and it's not right if you can't drink it, and especially if you're low income, for instance. You don't have the money to buy bottled water or a filter or whatever. That's not right. That's not respecting the dignity and worth of every individual. So, but just politics, that's where I am. And I really believe that I don't think government is by definition bad. I think it can do bad things. And I think it has been in certain cases, that's for sure, what's been coming out. But I don't think it's just a problem by itself. I think it can be helpful in solving problems. But I think it can go too far, too. And for instance, fluoridating the water, that's the Portland City Council. I think they went too far. That is putting a drug in the water, and that's not right. And,
what about the people who say that fluoridation is an excellent idea, and it's a healthy move for us to do as a society, as a culture, to be sure that everybody gets fluoridated?
Well, in the first place, we don't think it's effective at all. And there have been a lot of studies. In fact, the latest Oregon one that came out, although it hasn't been officially released, the data was. And I want to give a big thumbs up to K2TV for uncovering this. And that
it's a local
the kids,
channel.
Yeah, it's the ABC affiliate here. And kids in unfluoridated Portland had actually a lower cavity rate than kids in fluoridated cities and towns in other parts of Oregon. And that just reflects what has been found in cities and towns around the country. And it just really doesn't work that well. So right from the start, I don't think that argument is valid. But I think most people that want fluoridation, I don't think they're bad people. I think they're very well intentioned. I think they really believe that, because that's all you've heard over so many years, that it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And if that's all you hear, then you're going to believe that. And but once you start really studying the science, which I did, then it became apparent very quickly that that wasn't the case.
So the battle still goes on around the country about fluoridation?
Absolutely. And the narrative you're hearing from after we had this incredible victory here, 61 to 39% that we won by, it was a landslide. The opponents of fluoridation, and this, as of May 21st, and this was an incredible election. But the narrative you hear, that's fascinating, is that, well, it's Portland, you know how weird they are, and all the wacko lefties and the wacko righties, they did this, and that's why Portland. What they're not saying is that, take a look 6 months ago in Wichita, Kansas, the antithesis of Portland. Midwest, West Coast, conservative Republican mostly, liberal Democrat Portland, and as conventional, I know I'm generalizing here, as maybe we tend to be sometimes unconventional. So, and yet they had virtually the same margin of victory there, stopping fluoridation. They won 60 to 40. So it isn't just, it's not just the left and the right. What the print media is not talking about is the big middle. And I think our message got out to them that we got some of the best water in the country, and we don't want to add more chemicals to it. And we simply believe we know there are better alternatives to reducing tooth decay than fluoridation that do not cause harm to health as it's excess baggage.
What's the real motivation behind those who are pushing for fluoridation across the board?
That gets asked a lot. Like, where's the money? Who's getting paid on this? This is a different issue. It's a different animal. There is money to be made. This is the fluoride they put in the water is an industrial byproduct of the phosphate fertilizer industry. It is a hazardous waste. If it wasn't being sold to municipalities or used in some other industrial use, it would have to be disposed of as a hazardous waste. I swear I'm not making this up. And because can often be, because one, it's just so corrosive, but two, it can often be contaminated with arsenic and or lead. So the companies, the phosphate fertilizer industry, instead of having to pay money to get rid of it in a hazardous waste facility, they can sell it. They're making money on both sides. So they are, and the engineering firms that would build and design the equipment to do this, they make money. Bottled water. If tens of thousands of people cannot or will not have water, fluoridated water. So they're going to have to do something to either buy bottled water if they can afford it, or get a filter, an expensive filter. The cheap ones don't work. So there's money to be made. But having said that, this is one of those rare issues, I think, because we're used to dealing, when I was dealing with GMOs, obviously Monsanto and their buddies were making money, or the tobacco industry I would go head to head with when I was with the Cancer Society. It's the tobacco companies. Global warming, Exxon Mobil, they're making money.
You take on the big boys.
Yeah, it seems to have ended up that way. Unlike them, I don't know, maybe I'm being naive, I don't think money is the main driver in this. It's a factor, but I don't think it's the main driver.
What is?
I think it's more inertia, is that people have been fed this information constantly, and it's just kind of like we've done it for so long, and nothing can be wrong with it. Well, yeah, it is. There really is, and if you look around the world, most countries will not fluoridate. Look at Europe. 5 countries out of 48 fluoridate. That's it. And they'll say the same reasons.
Bunch of socialist countries, that's what's wrong with them.
So it's just a fascinating issue, and honestly, I'm coming at it from the science. I used to think it was okay until I started reading the science, and it became very apparent, like I said. But most people are not going to be as geeky as I am in getting into it. If that's what you've heard, if the American Medical Association, Dental Association, if they say it's okay, or the CDC, which all have, oftentimes people tend to follow authority. The 3 of us don't necessarily follow authority. We may want to look at things definitely. We question it, and when I did question it, that's when I found out that I simply was not going to go along with it.
I'm aware, I'm getting signals from the control room that they're going to yell at me if we don't take a break. And then we may have 1 or 2 more things to say about fluoridation, but there's so many other things like LGBT and, what is it now?
RBG.
RGB, I get them all mixed up.
Everybody gets them mixed up, don't worry.
And we'll cover some more things and some other things that you guys have talked about before that.
LGBT is not a disease or a chemical byproduct.
I don't know. Shall we take a break in there, Mr. Control Room, Mr. Ellery, our director? Mike's going to be off.
Yeah, great.
Out of here, Ron.
Back, and thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about whatever else we've decided to talk about. We've decided to talk about the Alliance for Democracy and what that organization and its members have been about through the years and the success they've had and winning victories in the name of justice and fairness and decency and human decency and so on and so forth. We've touched on a couple of things like fluoridation, and there's a whole bunch more we need 3 hours to cover, but where shall we go to next and talk about the Alliance for Democracy's work on a particular issue that was important?
Yeah. Well, I would just, before we go to a specific item, I'd just like to to comment on the mission of the Alliance for Democracy.
Please do.
Right, and the mission is to establish true democracy, create a just, equitable, create a just society based on an equitable, sustainable economy. And there's a third one. I can't remember the third one. Oh no.
Because you couldn't remember how to say equitable. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, that.
Yeah.
And ending corporate domination is the major one. Actually, I almost forgot it.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of our focus, and everything that we work on somehow relates to that core mission statement. And then the other thing is that we have a motto, and the motto is: the issue is not the issues, the issue is the system.
Will you say that again?
The issue is not the issues, the issue is the system. So what we're looking for, while we get ourselves involved in, for instance, this campaign about fluoridating the water, that's a specific issue. But when we talk about ending corporate personhood, or we talk about ending corporate domination, or we talk about the free trade agreements, we're talking about how the system in a large aspect operates, and how we change that so that we as Americans actually can fulfill our mission of having a democratic society, which is based on the power of the people's voice as opposed to the corporate voice.
Well, corporations are persons, aren't they? Didn't the Supreme Court decide that corporations were persons?
The Supreme Court has said that many times, and unfortunately,
And
the
they've acted
Supreme
on it
Court is
recently?
wrong.
But aren't corporations treated now as though they're persons, and they're able to spend as much money as they want to in the electoral process?
Yes, and that's a big problem, and that's why we focus on the system and changing that. So we're part of the Move to Amend national group, movetomend.org, which is advocating for a 28th Constitution Amendment that makes clear that corporations are not people, that they do not have constitutional rights, and that money is not speech, money is property, and needs to be regulated, because if money is not regulated, then it overwhelms us always.
Are you anti-money?
I am not anti-money. I have money in my pocket. We all need money to exchange things. It's not a question about money. It's about how you distribute the money.
You're saying it's the system. Yeah, and I agree. What do you think about that, Rick? You think a major cause of our problems today, economically and socially, is a result of money and corporations?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What's the answer?
It's, I think the answer is pretty much what David said. To me, money in elections and in the government, especially corporate money or big individual money, is just killing our democracy. And that is the head of the octopus right there. And you've got all these tentacles coming out, whether it's the elections, the government, this pervasiveness in university research, them getting in there, the consolidation of the media and corporate control over the media, and just being more and more consolidated, and fewer voices being heard. So all of these are the legs of the octopus. The head it's just too much money. And when you hear that our representatives in Congress, representatives and senators, have to spend easily, 25, 30% or more of their time raising money, this is absurd. And this system has got to be changed. Otherwise, I very much fear for our democracy, and I fear for, say, what I consider the tree hugger in me and just the environmentalists. Global warming is quite possibly the scariest thing in terms of what it can do to the entire Earth and everybody in it that I've ever seen. But what have you got that's causing global warming? You've got companies like ExxonMobil who are doing all these things to keep perpetuating and making it worse, simply for making profit. And that's a classic example right there. Whether they've made contributions to senators and Congress people to keep up these policies that are not alleviating global warming, but just simply making it worse. That's one example.
Isn't the American system encouraging profit making? Isn't our whole system predicated on the idea of making profit? What's wrong with making a profit?
Well, I think the end and the means have become reversed. It is almost as if making money is become the end and everything is subservient to making money, whether it's our quality of life, it's our environment, whatever. That this has assumed this pinnacle here, rather than making money and having a job and being part of going up toward a quality of life and justice and equality and compassion. That's where I think that should be. That should be a means to an end, and I think they've gotten reversed.
But you don't look like you're starving and you can pay the rent, and apparently this system is working pretty well for you in America.
Well, I can say that. Actually, I've said this many times. My wife and I have said this many times to each other that, you know, for us personally, we're doing fine. And we're very lucky. We're not rich by any stretch, but we're comfortable. We're healthy. We live fulfilling lives. So in terms of our lives, things have rarely been better. But when we look around, and I see so many people unemployed or underemployed, so many people sick without health insurance, so many people just suffering. My God, it's just, it's incredible. When I look at a typical school system where you've got 40 or 50% of the kids are eligible for reduced price lunches or free, and you just think of the pervasiveness of poverty in this country and this incredible increasing gap between a very, very few rich and so many poor. This can't keep up. This kind of society is just bound to collapse.
It has kept up for many, many years. Why would it continue to keep up?
Well, I think it's getting worse.
All
the time.
Just worldwide, because it's a worldwide system. It's not just an American system. And worldwide, the inequities just get worse and worse and worse, and people do react. And you've seen, the reaction of the Greeks to the austerity measures, and the French had conflicts, and the British had a couple of years ago had riots because these governments were imposing austerity measures, which were telling people who were already poor or were already struggling that they had to pay more when they couldn't. And people were reacting to that. And right now or in the last few days, we've seen things in Brazil. And Brazil is a reasonably prosperous nation. But we're seeing, those kinds of reactions on the part of people saying, no, these kind of inequities cannot continue. You can't keep driving people down and allowing other people to rise to a pinnacle without somebody saying, this is unfair, and we're not going to stand it anymore.
We're not going to stand it anymore. Who is saying that? Not the ones with all the money
am.
nor the power.
No, the ones with the power are quite happy with the way the system works for them. But at some point, many of them will realize, and do realize now, that this system, based on more and more wealth flowing to fewer and fewer people, is not a sustainable system.
The American empire is crumbling. It's been suggested by a few people who I admire and look up to through the years. And they're suggesting that the American empire, like empires of the past, they go up and they reach a certain level and then they fall apart and the empire disappears. Do you think the American empire is near its pinnacle, its peak, or is it going to start going the other way? Are we going to replace the kind of capitalism practiced by American empire with another form of government, like some form of socialism or communism or fascism, or what's the answer to the present system? What's the alternative?
I don't, economically, a good magazine to get is, probably many of your viewers subscribe to it already, is Yes Magazine.
Yes.
And the latest issue had about cooperatives, co-ops, whether it could be a food co-op or a credit union, and these businesses that are organized to serve their membership and the people. They don't have one CEO making a gazillion times as much money as the regular workers, and they're all working together, and very, very successful in many cases. And I think in terms of replacing the typical structure we have now of a corporate structure, we're seeing, you don't think about it that much, but there's a lot of those sprouting up. And I just think that's one good way to go about it from an economic viewpoint. Political, I don't have any great answers. When you see the deadlock in Washington, D.C., I was on a business trip out there a few years ago. Jeff Merkley had just started as senator, and I made an appointment, went in to see him. And about the first question I asked him, so I said, what's the biggest problem you see? And he said, the U.S. Senate is dysfunctional. And of course, he's talking about the filibuster system, and it is. And again, I just see how tough it is, and he's been working on trying to change the system, and it's not easy. So I don't have any silver bullet on that.
Yeah. So my fear is that we are moving, or have already moved, to a militarized security state, and that as this divide between the people widens, that we're going to feel that more and more placed on our necks, that the response will be more and more not local police, but militarized local police under the direction or coordinating with the FBI and the CIA and those things to have a security state that is dedicated to being sure that the people's voice doesn't get heard, and that and we already see it. I mean, so many times, whether it was in response to like the Battle of Seattle, where we're talking about the WTO, they're having the meetings and the people are gathering in the streets, and the response of the authorities to that. There was in Miami, there was a large gathering for another one of the trade agreements, and I forget which one it was, but where they just took people and arrested them with very little cause to get them out of the streets, so that the meetings could continue. I'm really very fearful about because I really don't see anything happening in Congress that will end this deadlock, and so the only response then becomes one of a militarized security state. Or the other, but on the positive side is what Rick is just talking about, is that with all of this happening, that people are organizing. For instance, the cooperatives that Rick was just referring to, they're organizing alternatives to the current system, and those will continue to develop even as this other security state. Now at some point the security state fails, and then we have the roots of building a new system.
Anybody got a good joke or something? This is getting pretty depressing here.
Maybe we could ask those guys in the black helicopter hovering over your studio here, Don. I don't know. We could ask them if they know. They're probably connected in electronically somehow.
Yeah.
I think what's important is what we as individuals and collectively can do to head off the direction that we're heading in. I think we agree that America and our society, our culture, our system is such that things are getting worse and worse for ordinary citizens. and middle class is disappearing, and it'll continue to get worse and worse. It's so gradual until you don't realize what's going on until it's too late. Your goose is cooked or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
But what can we do other than be active in the Alliance for Democracy and other organizations like that? And on a personal level, I have a little funny story that I'm sure is going to be earth-shaking for you. What I do on a personal level, I wear signs, as you know. I have a collection of signs, probably 50 or 60 ones. Depending on my mood at the time, I'll create a sign that reflects my mood or my thinking at the time. And it isn't my fault. Somebody else had a free hugs sign. And I joined him one day. We were at Pioneer Courthouse Square in downtown Portland. And we're standing on the corner asking people if they want free hugs. What an experience. What a joyful, delightful experience. Bottom line, it comes down to human-to-human contact and relationship. That's beyond what we are aware of, what we're saying, what we're doing. It's some sort of connection that occurs. And that will occur when human beings hug each other. And just the very act of going through that, I was in a Safeway the other morning, bright and early in the morning. It wasn't very crowded. And I was in the produce section. And there was a little old lady, about 65 years old, who glanced at me with my sign around my neck saying, "Free hugs, just ask." And she looked, and I thought she may be susceptible. So I said, "Do you want one?" And she said, "No." And finally I convinced her, and she says, "Yeah." So I went over where she was, and she clung to me. Literally just melted in my arms, you know. And of course, I forgot about everything. But then when we stopped, there was another little old lady next to her. They weren't together, but she saw what was going on. And I got this second old lady to look at me, and she said no. And then the first old lady said to her, "Go ahead, do it. You really enjoy it." You know? She's hustling this woman. Anyhow, the second little old lady didn't go for it. But as we were leaving the store, the first little lady and I were looking at each other. We had a secret, a smile. However, we can manifest this in the person-to-person connection, perhaps magically, and I'm not too far in woo land out here, we can get the people with the real power to be humanely responsible for loving and being kind to each other. We've got to do whatever it is that's however remotely possible to have some effect and change the direction that we're heading.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And it does seem like the country, if you look at a continuum, on one end, you're on your own. On the other end, we're in this together. Mm-hmm. It seems like as a society, over the past decades, we've been, I mean, everybody at one time or another, is on one end of the continuum or not, but just generally how you live your life, mm-hmm. It seems like society has been going more toward you're on your own. And I really think, society-wise, I would like to see it go back to we're in this together. Yeah. Maybe, if I'm doing fine, but you're not, whatever I can do to help you. Basic golden rule kind of stuff. I don't know that it gets any more complicated than that.
Yeah, and there is a lot of movement toward we're in this together, and particularly when we see responses to like natural disasters and hurricanes and so forth, and people really helping each other, and going across country to help, and all those kinds of things are all very helpful kind of things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And what I'm hoping is that the folks at the top realize this drive to move toward a philosophy of we're in this together, and we'll give up some of that power and some of that wealth and be willing to distribute it back. Because in the end, if they don't distribute it back, they can't get it. The system collapses at some point.
And you gotta fight for it. I'm not talking about militarily, but it's like Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand.
Yeah.
It never has, and it never will, and it won't. And you got to fight for it. You got to step up. And apathy is a real problem. And people just, people sometimes ask you, what can you do? And my basic answer is, what issue really resonates with you the most? And what are you most enthusiastic about? Or alternatively, what are you most angry about? And people think of anger as a negative emotion, and it certainly can be, but if it spurs you on to do something in the cause of making a better society, it can be a very positive thing.
Of course.
And, so whatever your motivation is, just get involved in whatever resonates with you the most. And that's where I think you'd be the most effective.
Right, and I certainly agree with that. And I hope that, at least some people will look at the things that we emphasize, which are, working on the 28th Amendment to make clear again, that corporations are not people, and that the rights which are delineated in the Bill of Rights are our rights. They're not corporate rights. And we need to make that clear, and when we need to get rid of the money in politics. And that can be done through a constitutional amendment.
Just give them one example about the Trans-Pacific Partnership that ought to make people angry.
Yeah, so the Trans-Pacific Partnership, well, let me start with Obama's election. When he first ran for office, he said that he favored examining all of the existing quote-unquote free trade agreements and adjusting them so that they're more favorable toward Americans, to ordinary citizens. Since then, he has been negotiating a new free trade agreement called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he's been doing this for 3 years in secret, and we're just beginning to hear about it. And what we're hearing about it is that it is another NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, in style. We still don't get to look at the text of the agreement, but 600 corporate lobbyists and the companies that they work for are privy to that text, get to comment on that text, get to write that text, and we don't get any input onto it. And now, as if that wasn't bad enough, and I will also point out that the fact that this is all done in secret, even someone like Senator Wyden, who chairs the Senate Subcommittee on Trade, which will eventually look at this and comment on it, cannot look at this, at the text, unless he goes into a room by himself with no pencil, no paper, making no notes, taking no cameras, and then swears that he will not discuss what he reads, except in the most general terms.
How can you hear this and not be outraged?
Yeah.
And honestly, just a real quick, just on the fluoridation, that had been discussed for months. The city council, Portland City Council, all of a sudden the Oregonian just very much breaks the story. Oh, we're going to fluoridate.
Yeah.
One commissioner, Randy Leonard, is leading it. Within 2 weeks, two other, the mayor and Mayor Sam Adams at the time and Nick Fish, said, we're for it. Before any meaningful discussion could take place with anybody on the other side, they had 3 out of 5 city commissioners. So these discussions, and many people were just very angry about the whole process. A lot of them even were pro-fluoride. But it's this kind of taking democracy and putting it in the back room where it's not accessible to the rest of us. And just looking ahead at water issues, a lot of people are very upset at a lot of other water issues going on now. And that's another question for people to look at.
Yeah.
And I'm getting very nervous because the clock is winding down and we haven't even touched on things that are critically important. For example, are you going to vote for Hillary in 2016?
Oh my gosh.
I was thinking about that.
I don't know what I'm going to do next week, Doc.
Right.
You can't ask me that.
Let me ask you one closing question here. So you have a message or a comment to the viewers that would be of use for them in consideration of what we talked about today and the 28th Amendment and taking back our democracy and having America be the shining city on the hill that it was meant to be. Any comments? Look at the camera and talk to the viewers out there for a minute or so. Take about 30 seconds.
I just on that issue, corporations are not people. And money is not speech. And I think to change that system is probably one of the greatest challenges that we face. And I can't say any more than that. I could, but I think that's that's basically what I believe.
David,
Yeah.
David, we're running out of time.
Okay, all right, so support the 28th Amendment to the Constitution to eliminate corporate personhood and money is speech. Call your representatives, call your senators, ask them to support the We the People Amendment, and you can go to a website called wethepeopleamendment.org to read the amendment, support that. Trans-Pacific Partnership, call your representatives, demand that the text be released and that the president not be given fast-track authority, which would grease the skids for imposing that agreement on us.
Oh, that's enough. That's enough. We got to have a time for at least 1 or 2 public service announcements because they're really important. Can you put a few of those up, Mr. Ellery? To get my show local broadcast schedule, go to my website and click on present day activities to see when you can watch my show. And the next PSA I want to put up for you on the screen is coming up in a moment. The ACLU, without the American Civil Liberties Union, our civil liberties would be further in the tube than they are right now. We need the ACLU desperately nowadays. Go to the ACLU website, learn about the American Civil Liberties Union, and get my shows broadcast by the stations. Ask your local public access station somewhere else in the country to go to pegmedia.org and follow the instructions on how to get my shows broadcast over there. Oh, again, ending corporate personhood. Yeah, go to move-to-amend.org. That is so critically important. It's probably the most important consideration I can think of right now to save our democracy. All right, so looks like, oh, rest in peace, poor people's president, Hugo Chavez, hero of mine, Hugo Chavez, rest in peace. Thanks for watching. And remember KFC? Not that KFC. Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable.
Oh, okay.
Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too, and to you too, and to you tuners. Thanks again for watching. Had a good time with these guys. I hope you did too. Can I have them back on again? You better believe it. Thanks again. Good.